Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. We're accumulating so much data today, but what are you doing with it to better your social media efforts, your creative efforts? And the data you get, is it simply metrics that matter from your research, or some metrics that your agency gives you that sounds good in a presentation that your upper management needs? After all, are you truly measuring what your audience is saying to you? Stephen Parra is the Chief Creative Officer of Absolute Magnitude, a New York based digital agency focused on leveraging data to enable better creative executions. And on this episode, we'll discuss creative, social, data, creating spectacles, zombies, bright stars, Oreos, Nutter Butters, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a Chief Creative Officer with a Chief Shark Officer on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. So tell us, if you will, what's your story and your background to date?
Hi, Kenneth. How are you? Thank you so much for letting me join you
Yeah, you
today.
bet.
Talk to all the other folks in the ocean here. Um, so I've got a kind of a little bit of an interesting story. I've always been in advertising. I guess that's not the interesting part, but I've done a lot of different things. It's a I hate to say this, over a 20-year career. I mean, I'm happy about the 20-year career, but I'm getting long in the tooth, I guess. I started out as an art director and then realized I was writing all the headlines. So I then switched to be a copywriter. I did that for quite a long time and became an ACD, CD, ECD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I started a couple of agencies. I was early. While I started in print and TV, I was very early digital and guerrilla. Got quite a lot of enjoyment out of that, and have morphed into social and kind of my the thing that's always interested me was to continually advance where everybody else was going to be. I like to pass where the stake is going to be rather than follow the action. I'd rather be leading the action, if that makes.
Yeah.
So we're Absolute Magnitude, full service creative and research agency. So what's a little bit interesting about us is that we are, what we like to say is we're data powered creativity.
So you said your focus a lot on is on social today, and that's sort of the topic du jour.
Yep.
Where do you see social media today with how brands are using it as a whole? We're seeing a lot of likes and shares and everything just fall off a cliff, especially for brands. But what's your viewpoint on where social is today, especially with brands?
So currently, I mean, it's interesting because I think savvy marketers have moved on from like what we would consider vanity metrics, and they're
Yeah.
looking
Well, you'd
looking
hope.
for deeper insights. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you have, and actually, it's what that's a very interesting point because you're often surprised by who is in that category and who isn't, and you do spend some time, educating. I think. The platforms are always going to be moving. This expectation that they're going to be like what traditional advertising and media has been, where this is what you pay for, this is what you get, and this is what you can expect, is that's going to change. That will always be changing. So, in a lot of ways, you should be thinking about where where you should be and what is beneficial for the brand. I think a lot of brands currently are interested in metrics that they can report up in tangible ways that their senior leadership can tout in, some sort of a keynote or report or something like that. This is a little, social is in a large way the new marketing, and social is a poorly defined area by which we think about platforms, but the reality is social can be almost anything. Um, Anything that generates attention in a bite-sized format that is has the ability to gain more interest than what you've paid for. Uh, so I think if you think about social in a broad strokes manner rather than likes and shares and things like that, you can use it to your advantage. I think in many ways that our clients not necessarily our clients, but many folks should consider bringing that in house on a communications level. But as far as a strategic and a marketing level, they need expert advice on where to take their brand. It would be no different than um, comms planning or television or any of those pieces. But when you talk you would never outsource your head of sales. So that's where the collaboration should come in between a marketer and an agency. An agency can point you in the best possible direction, and you should adopt that.
Yeah, so to that point of bringing it in house, though, that kind of goes towards innovation as well. In the moment you bring it in house, a lot of that innovation stops. So when
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
think about sort of pushing that envelope with what you think is innovative and new and cool and is going to resonate on brands versus what is approved by an in-house communications team, how do you sort of approach that and guide them so that they can move it forward?
Well, and that's a really good point. That was sort of what I was alluding to a minute ago about the collaboration between agency and marketer. The important piece here is, though you should bring the day-to-day community management conversation aspect of it in-house, um, you should absolutely not be working on this type of thing in a silo. Um, this is where innovation is critical, and agencies, especially ours, are built to innovate. That is our fundamental task, is to be bringing you things that are new and different and will gain you attention, and drive your you know drive your business forward. When you're looking down the hallway at the guy that pays the checks, and he is the guy that pays your check, it's very difficult to innovate. You want necessarily to maintain and do exactly what's asked of you. Whereas an agency can come in and say, here are things that have worked in the past. Here's our perspective on what the future looks like. Here's where your audience is. Here's the type of thing they respond to. You can have a whole panoply of thought and option and ways to distinguish yourself as a brand, um, while you are doing the wonderful execution.
Yeah, and so you brought up a favorite negative phrase of mine, which is silos.
Mm,
And I'm looking at some of the
yes.
brands even that you've worked with that are listed on your website. I know some of them, having worked with them in the past, where even some of their social teams sit in a different building, let
Yep.
alone a hallway or floor or different managers, but sit literally in a different building than the communications team. So getting them to break down those silos of the way they're thinking and what's approved again is something that I've found to be quite a challenge. So when you look at some of them, and I'm going to bring up Wendy's as a particular example. It's one of my fun ones, but
Yeah.
if you think of how they did their Twitter feed, how do you look at keeping social now interesting every day with the brands you work with? Because if you look at Wendy's, at least on their Twitter feed, that's not the perfect example because they're sort of the unicorn and the original one with that sort of sarcasm sense of humor that's gotten them a lot of notice. But how do you look at keeping a lot of the brands you work with innovative and interesting every day? Because that's a hard thing. You might have one great piece, but it's the 30 days from now and 60 days from now, to get a brand that's known for having a great social media presence.
The, I mean, our job is to break down silos. Our job is to ensure that you're thinking about things strategically from a 40,000-foot view. What is best for your customer? Um, Wendy's is a wonderful example because they do wonderful work, but it was based in research. Part of our offering, when we'll talk about it, but we're 50% research. But when you're able to go in and you know fundamentally base your ideas in
Exactly.
sound research, you can get much more interesting for your customers. People look at things like Wendy is a massive risk. How can they do this sort of thing. But when you look at the data on the upfront and you say, wow, your audience is expecting this, they want to be talked to in this way, they want a relationship that looks like this, you can walk in and say, hey, listen, our our end user persona looks like this. This is the type of thing that they want. Our agency is able to help them break down styles in two ways. One, this research that we produce isn't just for social, it's for an organization. We might even go in and say, here's ways that you can communicate with each other, and you might need this component from, Marcom. This component might be useful for you from social. This might be above the line. Like, we can help orchestrate and facilitate the you know the making silos transparent. I don't know, as though it's not our job to reorganize one of our clients, but it is our job to make everything work better. um, so when you can really found things in deep, smart research, analytics, and data, then your creative opens wide up. And if you're able to connect the dots with other departments, other teams, then you can really get a robust 360 perspective. We don't necessarily make any money more, not a cent more, by connecting these teams together, but we love to be the ligature. We want to be the glue that makes great marketing happen. So that's where our research and our creative come in.
So one of the things now I think that I see so often that I've just been doing a lot of research on lately is that so many people especially but brands as well are starting to really start to create spectacles in order to get attention. It's not just an interesting social post, it's an interesting post or posts that are over the top. And how do you look sort of at the spectacle, at stuff that's so elevated that it becomes, somebody trying to create something viral, as opposed to when it just organically and authentically becomes viral itself?
Well, the spectacle, I appreciate the spectacle. Our job, and I think every brand's job, is to obviously create attention for themselves, but also um, break through. When you're talking about, I forget what the latest statistic is, just 500,000 messages launched at you every day or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. You're needing to cause your audience to take an action. This is beyond just taking notice.
Mm-hmm.
So engineering something that gets people to engage is your primary job. Now, really important to that is not the period of the sentence. Really important to that is to do that wisely, smartly. There's been so many examples of brands that have crashed against the rocks because
Yeah.
they were simply trying to get attention. It has always been the case that your attention has to be wise in its execution and smart in its content. um, you can't just simply go out there and say any old random thing and think anybody's going to take you seriously as a brand. and
Agreed.
and most importantly, off brand. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see things that are completely outside of um, of a brand's purview, just to get attention. I mean, you wouldn't want to show up at a cocktail party and walk over to the person that is just screaming in a corner.
Right. Sure.
You want to walk over to Truman Capote, who is holding court, who's fascinatingly interesting and has wonderful things to say, and is very entertaining. That's who you want to walk over and talk
Mm-hmm.
to. We look at it like that. You absolutely want to create a quote unquote spectacle, or massive interest, but you don't want to do it in a cheap or weak way.
Well, one of the things I did like that's spectacle-ish is something you guys did with Sky News, which was
Mm,
the zombie or the Walking Dead piece.
yeah.
Talk about how you sort of create something that really looks like news, if not fake news, but it's something that really was interesting. If you'll kind of set us up and tell a little bit about what the whole. I mean, basically, you kicked off season 7 for Sky News by listening to the Walking Dead fans and then publishing a fake news report convincing viewers that the Walking Dead was real and coming. It's a
Yeah.
great video. The Sky News reporter did an amazing job making it look very real and authentic,
Yeah.
authentically silly, but it was great. And so, when you look at creating those kind of pieces, what's your mindset in trying to create that?
So that was a lot of fun, and to be fair, it was prior to this drumbeat of fake news, quote
Right.
unquote fake news. So, we were a little bit in the clear on this one.
And he
We
got like 14 million views in one weekend.
Yeah, in a not even. I mean, we had gotten the bulk of that on by Friday night,
Wow.
basically. It was a out of the box success. So it was for Sky, and it was the season 7 launch of The Walking Dead, and we had done some research that told us that our audience wanted a really immersive experience. So that set the teams off on different ideas, and someone came up with the conceptual play space of the War of the Worlds.
Hmm.
And the early H.G. Wells story and Orson Welles's radio adaptation of the invasion a small town in New Jersey by aliens. And it was the result of that was this amazing outcry. People thought it was actually happening, and it was really really excellent. So much so that they had to get back on the radio and tell everybody that it wasn't real. And so many complaints. It's a fascinating story. It's fantastic, and we used this as an inspirational space for ours. So we said to ourselves, what if we were able to announce in a very small way that there was a viral outbreak north of London? Um, and we had kicked around some other ideas and a few things, and this one kept bubbling back up to us. And we were building our own internal caveats. If we can only do this, if we can only do that. One, we said, what if we were able to use the Sky News readers on Sky News to help announce this? How
Hmm.
can we make things, we don't trust in viral, quote unquote viral. We trust in um, real ability to make something have mass appeal. So we said if the Sky News readers were to slowly over the course of an evening announce that something's going on, they're getting reports in, they don't quite know what it is just yet, but they'll keep us in touch with the news. And that's how we broke it. So we said, and we went to Sky and we fully expected them to go, that's crazy. There's no chance we're using the Sky news readers to do this. There's no chance we're broadcasting that live on TV. You're out of your minds. From the second we presented that, they were on board. They thought it was the great idea. Let's do it. And this is where a partnership with a great client in a good agency produces awesome results. They were on board with it because the research pointed very strongly to this immersive experience. They saw that early. They saw that in the pitch. And when we did it, we knew we had to execute in a very smart and refined way. This wasn't spectacle for spectacle's sake. This was, we have to do this right so that people actually believe it could happen. So we got some of the greatest makeup artists involved. We got some amazing directors of photography and filmmakers involved, and we produced lots of little cell phone videos of people in shadows. You couldn't really make it out. It led to a sense of credibility over the course of the night. The figures got more clear, the story got more defined, the cell phone videos were more crisp, and you could see that they were zombies.
Yeah. And so so all of this took place on social, right? This was
This is
all
largely social. Yep.
largely social. Where did it have the most legs on social?
Well, when I say social, so like I was saying earlier, social can be a lot of things. The newsreaders were reading this live. This was on TV, and they were going to their social channels to see what was going on, to Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere to see what was going on. We had a 360 war room set up so that we could get everything out in good time. No no hiccups, no nothing. We got lots of uplift on Twitter, and I think that Facebook was the biggest pull out of all of this. Um, but certainly the offline to online aspect of it made it really powerful.
Great.
It lent that credibility.
Well, then let's take a hard pivot and talk about something you brought up earlier, which is
Hmm.
data powered creativity. Unpack that, if you will, what you mean by data powered creativity, especially as how it applies to social media and the type of imagery and videos and everything else that you produce that is created based upon data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a fundamental belief that the best creative that you can produce comes from the smallest, tightest, most limiting box that you're asked to produce it in. People want this blue skies. We can think of everything. Blah blah blah. I think if all the highways are open, you have no idea which way to drive. I look at it like this: if you give me something finite, I will produce a garment. So data was where people are producing large amounts of data in order to justify decisions. And we were frustrated with that because we looked at data as the birth of a decision. This is the opening area by which you can play in order to discover something about your audience, about your market, about your competitors, and it helps inform what direction you need to take. If you build that box really tight, data says you can do X, Y, but not Z, or whatever the parameters are, guaranteed the creative result off the back end of that will be a crisp, smart, thoughtful thing that your audience will respond to. Literally because you've done the work to find that out. So in order to build the box really tight, we do a lot of research on the front end in order to understand where our audience is going to be. We have a product called AIMS, Audience Intent Modeling System, and what that is a suite of tools, bespoke tools, a lot of machine learning AI, coupled with traditional research that points us in the direction of where your audience is going to be. We build that box extremely tight so that we get the most finite, smart, executable, creative that we can get. I have this fundamental belief that if you build a smart but tight box, your creative result will be really crisp, on point. Your audience is going to be super engaged. Um,
And what kind of data are you putting into that data set, though?
in order to really inform, our number one task is to understand who our audience is in its deepest and richest form.
Sure.
We conduct, you know, uh, machine learning. We do lots of different studies in order to understand who they are, but really it's a case by case basis. Each client will need something a little bit different, and so therefore, when we form our initial hypotheses, they're largely based on the things that they need. Um, we do lots of social listening.
Yeah.
We do lots of surveying and things like that. But our social listening's a little bit. We try and be as smart as possible with it. Certain keywords I think, are largely not terribly informative, and you have to go back through the data and sift through it. We look for intent, sentiment, deeper analysis, not just a single keyword, but a whole phrase, emojis, all kinds of things like that to truly gauge what our audience believes and feels. So our work on the upfront is fairly intense, with as much data as we can possibly get. But really, it's case by case. Each of our clients has a particular need, and we formulate that with them together. We don't magic anything up in absence of our client and then present it to them. We work with them to discover what's most important. Um, and in a lot of ways, it's sometimes difficult to understand, but we in fact boil the ocean to find out just a few nuggets that
Sure.
we can execute against. We're doing massive data digestion, ingest to discover very, very specific things.
For brands that you work with, how do you help them deal with declining organic reach?
That is a fantastic question. The platforms, and I might have alluded to this earlier, are always going to be changing. You should be aware of that and anticipate it. You can never go wrong if you're always doing the right thing for your audience.
Yeah.
Um, so, you
A
should
big
still be
big emphasis on
spending.
if for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you should always be spending media dollars to get attention. There's no such thing as completely viral or completely organic anymore. You should be doing really smart medium and creative media buys that are engineered to not just complete against what you've purchased, but also to build organic. Um, but you should always be executing in your audience's best interest in a way that will garner attention. Something very creative, something very smart. These are ways that you maximize your media dollars to get more out of them. Um, I think people with a perspective that one exists without the other are doing a bit of a disservice to their end user. They should be thinking about organic as a supplemental to paid, and paid only effective as good as you've built the creative. And the way you build great creative is through great data and have people do interesting things with that information. So all of I talk in terms of all of these things being connected. They are all connected. That 40,000 foot view is critical. And that's why you have a great agency partner to discuss all of these different aspects with you as you're formulating your plan or your campaigns or your social presence or any of these things. What can we do that's smart? Um, how do we build something that lasts?
Talk, if you will, today. You're on the creative side, leveraging data. Your particular focus is social, but you call yourself a full service digital agency. How do you look at the state of the full service agency today, especially when some of the things that we're talking about? So many try to tackle everything. They want to tackle
Hmm.
every kind of problem, but you brought up a couple of points as to how an agency should work with a team. I'm not asking you to defend any or all agencies,
Hmm.
obviously, other
Yeah.
than your own. But how do you sort of look at the state of the full service agency model today and where it plays with the changing landscape of where brands and advertisers are working with agencies?
Absolutely, it's a great question. The I think full service agency means something different today. The perspective is everything.
Yeah.
What it used to mean was an agency that would do your print ads and your radio and your TV and everything else. It, it, we look at it a little bit differently, and I think the savvy places do as well. The We're full service in as much as we serve where the creative and where the research leads us and the creative should be executed.
Yeah.
So we will do a 360 campaign provided it's warranted. If you can do one aspect of it and serves your needs, or like several, or whatever that prescription looks like, then that's what you should do. But we have the capabilities to produce any great idea. That's what we mean by full service. And I think a lot of agencies want to be everything to everyone. Where we start and stop are, should you do this or not at all? That's the way we think about a full service agency. We advise you to do the right thing, or help us think about things in the right way. And we have the ability to execute it wherever it leads us. Um, but simply because you ask something, we're not immediately going, and you should have a radio campaign, and you
Yeah.
should have a TV spot, and you should have social, and you should have. What's the smart answer? Let's go do that. That's how we think of full service.
Well, Stephen, you're on a very creative podcast, if you will, a shark's perspective. So, creatively speaking, I guess, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, geez, this is a silly thing, but I've been a swimmer, um, yeah, my whole life, but I swam, in high school and college, and our swim team were the hammerhead sharks. So
Oh,
I
nice.
have a bit of an affinity for the hammerhead. They're beautiful and bizarre and strange and you know interesting creatures. I guess in a lot of ways it mirrors my perspective on things. Be interesting, um, and gain some attention for that. A lot of sharks look the same, but man, that's a cool shark.
Agreed. Well, Stephen, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the five most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Oh, I'm taking a deep breath. Let's do
All
this.
right, number one, here we go. Number one, Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook for me. Uh, I've constructed it as sort of as a news channel. I'm not as
Yeah.
interested in my friends' families, although I love them all. I've constructed Facebook to serve a very specific need. Do I love everything Facebook is doing? No. And I do use Twitter as an excellent news feed, but I do I would say Facebook. Yeah.
All right, number two, Oreos or Nutter Butter?
Ooh, Oreos.
Okay.
Um, Love them.
No, no problem.
I defy anyone to have had a bad experience with
Yeah,
Oreos.
true. Number three, leveraging data or leveraging creativity?
um, Both.
Now you got to pick one or the other. Sophie's choice for
Bec-
you.
because I'm a creative, I will say leveraging data. It is critically important.
Okay. Number four, Snapchat or TikTok?
TikTok.
Why so?
Um, because it just
Because the
is
Chinese are taking all of the data they can
that's
from there.
that's the thing that terrifies me. But
Yeah.
as a platform, it is wildly entertaining, uh, uh, and people have used it in just wonderful, creative ways. And that's just a pure creative assessment. As far as a company, I mean, I love Snapchat very much,
Yeah,
and I agree with you. The Chinese angle is terrifying to me, but it's a lot of fun. It
it
really
is,
is.
and I think it kind of goes to one of our earlier questions too. Though, if you look at TikTok, there'll be the same song performed in some sort of lip sync and dance fashion by hundreds of thousands of people, and it
Yep.
all kind of boils down to which one is everybody's trying to out spectacle the other, and I think it's very interesting.
Everybody's trying to out-spectacle each other, but it's also about a larger conversation. Getting in on that moment
Yeah,
is a lot of what's fun. And I love that meta conversation that happens when everybody's trying to do a similar thing. And it breeds creativity, it breeds interesting things, you
yeah.
know?
Number five, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or
Mm-hmm.
cornbread.
Oh, geez. Cornbread if it's done really well.
All right. Well, Stephen, where can people find out more about you, learn about your company, and more?
So we are Absolute Magnitude, and you can find us at the URL The Brightness of a Star or Absomag. That's our nickname. The brightness of a star, because that is literally the definition of what an absolute magnitude is. It is the brightness of each star in and of itself, not observed from Earth. We thought that was a very interesting place to talk about what we could do for our clients, what is of intrinsic value to you and your audience, and how do we make them shine brighter against the darkness of everything else. We really liked that idea. Um, so and I'm a big fan of the space race. I love the boldness that it took for us to go to the moon, and I'd love more creative ways to do that. I think it's one of the most creative endeavors that we've ever done, and it's based largely on research. I think that's a fascinating example of what research and creativity can do when they come together.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So there was my conversation with Stephen Parr, the Chief Creative Officer of Absolute Magnitude, a New York-based digital agency focused on leveraging data to enable better creative executions. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, how you measure performance on social, how you roll it up to upper management, is not necessarily the way your relationships exist with your audience on social media. As Stephen said, it's often metrics they can simply report up. But I want you to always think about it like it's your own company and how you want it to be measured. An agency should point you in the right direction. But remember, if you're on the brand side, the measurements that the agency may give you that show progress may not necessarily reflect what is actually happening with the consumer. Likes and shares on posts, especially those that are not conversations with your customers on social channels, are often wasted metrics. If your CEO came and asked you today, how are we doing on social media? What are you going to tell them? That your average number of likes is up 10%? I mean, that's not a great measurement, especially with social, since it's a little bit of a wild, wild west in a lot of aspects. Just know how to explain that story. Whatever it is, just make sure to understand it first, and understand that this is a place for you to have a conversation with customers. Second, leverage as much data as you can, simply to help inform you of your creative decisions. It's the difference on what you think will work versus what the audience has told you will work. Simply put, it reflects what you're hearing them say. Third, the full-service agency is under attack, and some of that is merited, especially with some of the bad agencies out there. I know I've worked with quite a few of them as well. Picking the right agency is only part of it. Understanding how to work with that agency is such an important part of your success. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Always do the right thing for your audience, just like I always do for mine. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.